What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video for pre-season 2021-22. And in this one, I'm doing something a little bit different. I thought I'd try a few different things throughout this pre-season. So I've gone and asked 100 different FPL managers for their number one tip. And I basically gave them the choice of pre-season or very early on, like game week 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Because that's really what we're focused on when we're building our FPL team right now. I didn't provide too much context outside of that. Some people gave me more than one tip, so I just took their first one. I didn't tell them that because I didn't want to guide people in any way, right? So I've just taken them there. And for anyone that doesn't believe me, I'm not going to show you all my DMs on Twitter. That's where I asked everyone. I didn't really pick people in particular. I just went through a list that I had of people I followed, etc. and interactive were on my timeline at the time, and these are all the people that I reached out to. So if you want to go and check with these people wherever I DM them, you absolutely can. But yeah, I reached out to them, and not everyone replied. To be fair, I didn't give them very much time, but I've listed everyone there because they may reply to me when I'm even recording the video. So I think we've got about 80 to 85 responses. So I'm going to go through the main ones first, like what the overall tips were, and then look at some specific advice and info and things that people gave, which I thought was quite interesting. So let's jump into it. Okay, so these are the most popular tips, right? So because I only gave people the choice of giving me one tip, obviously the numbers are quite low, but 14 people from about 80 to 85 that responded from 100 people is still quite high on the list, right? So people have put that as their number one tip. I'm sure if I'd said, give me your top 5, and I'd put the numbers for that, obviously it would have been a lot higher. People would have chose multiple of these, but I still think it's interesting to look at. And I kind of tried to choose a variety of FPL managers. I didn't really cherry pick people, but I went down on the list. There's like presenters and stuff like that. There's podcasters. There's people that just post stuff on Twitter. There's people that aren't really content creators, but I follow because they talk about FPL and stuff like that. So there's a whole different variety of people. But some of the stuff we're going to talk about is like challenging info and challenging stuff like that. I mean, you could challenge me. Did I pick a broad spectrum of FPL managers, or did I pick people that, you know, are always going to give the similar type of advice, right? So straight away, you can maybe challenge this video, but keep watching, right? Because it'll be interesting for you. So the first one, the biggest one, was basically I tried to group a few where they'd said something a little bit different together, right? Because otherwise we'd have just an endless list of slightly different ways of wording things. But the top one, 14 people: avoid new signings, don't punt on unknown players, and stick to proven players, right? To be honest, I fully agree with this. I wouldn't say completely avoid new signings, right? And I think part of this comes into newly promoted teams, so your Watfords, your Norwiches, your Brentfords, etc. I don't think you have to completely avoid them, but I definitely wouldn't put too many players from a single team who've just been promoted or relatively unproven in the Premier League. We don't really know much about them. I try and limit the amount of those players that I would put in my team. So I do agree with that. And there's going to be some points on here that I don't necessarily agree with, and we'll see people's advice later on as well. Number 9 was attack fixtures and be aggressive. So I definitely agree on fixtures, right? You don't have much knowledge for pre-season other than what players have done before, what they might be able to do, and what their fixtures are and how teams performed last year. So you've got to go for them. I was quite surprised that being aggressive came out at number 9. Again, obviously it's going to depend on the type of FPL manager that I spoke about, but I do like the idea of taking hits if needed at the start of the season. Obviously there's other stuff in here like picking nailed on players and things like that, which are obviously going to help you be able to make transfers for players that maybe you hadn't considered that are suddenly looking good, etc. And also that you can wildcard early, right? I think a lot of people worry about using the wildcard. I don't really play to use it early, but I will use it early if I need to, so I remain flexible on that. So yeah, definitely agree. This one always comes up, right? Trust your gut. I don't really know what that really means, right? I guess if you've got a 50-50 decision, you pluck a name out of your head, just go with that. But usually there's a subconscious reason why that is your gut pick, right? Either something you've seen, something you're subconsciously remembering and stuff, I guess. But stick to your play style and challenge info. I think that's really important, right? When we see some of the specific messages that I got sent in a little bit, a lot of people said about challenging info and how there's loads of videos, mine included, right? You should absolutely challenge me. There's ways to do it, by the way. Just saying that team is rubbish is not really helpful feedback. Saying, you know, you got this stat wrong, or you said this, but actually do you not think it's more like this because of this? That's what you should be doing. There's going to be endless threads on Twitter. People are all going to have opinion. There's loads of podcasts podcasts, articles, videos, if you don't agree with something, or you're looking at a set of data and you're thinking, well, you've only picked 4 weeks. What if you use the whole season or half the season or 8 weeks? Does that change it? You should definitely be challenging information. Don't put too much emphasis on small sets of data. I definitely did that last year, right? As in, I stopped doing that. So a lot of people will say, well, this guy's just scored really well over 3 weeks. Well, why was that? Did they have good fixtures? Is it just a flash in the pan? Have they shown that they can score well in previous weeks? Ideally, you want a full set of season data. Obviously, you can't necessarily get that throughout a season, but in pre-season, you've got all of last year's data. Use it, right? It's really important. And that also means, like, when the season starts, if someone suddenly starts doing really well, who's never done well before in the first few weeks of the season, maybe challenge that as to why that is, and don't necessarily jump on them early. Pick a flexible team and think about price points. I spoke about this in my Building Your Game Week 1 video. You definitely want to be able to move players around easily without having to shift a load of money at once. Stay adaptable, keep an open mind, and avoid the noise. Definitely, right? Yes, we've got preconceived ideas of how players and teams will do. That might change. Be open to it. Be open to players that maybe you've labelled as trolls or injury prone. They're looking good and they're backing up with numbers, etc., and they've got good fixtures to come. Don't be afraid of bringing them in. And obviously, pick nailed players. It's super important, especially at the start of the season. You are going to want to move and transfer in players you haven't thought about. You don't also want to be considering having to get rid of players that just aren't playing at all. Okay, so here's some of the other tips that weren't necessarily said as much, but are still very important, right? So use pre-season to identify personnel formations and use local press info. So definitely pre-season. Don't worry about if some random player you've never heard about suddenly starts scoring. It's pre-season. Weird things happen. But looking at personnel, i.e. who's playing, and formations and stuff like that is really important. And I really like the idea of using local press info. The thing with FPL is everyone, I wouldn't say they've got an agenda, but a lot of people, and I probably do it myself without even knowing, create a narrative about players. If you go to like a local press, talking about their team, talking about a manager, tactics, etc., maybe they've got their own narrative for something else, but it's not about FPL. So that's quite important to sometimes get sources outside of the FPL world. Don't be different for the sake of it. You know I like that one. Be different when it's needed, or be different when you've spotted a genuinely good opportunity, but don't just do it for the sake of it, right? If you're starting to question why Mo Salah's in your team for Game Week 1 when he's playing Norwich straight away and he's a good captain option, you're probably doing it wrong. There's other things to worry about. One of them ain't Mo Salah. Avoid differential captains and plan for captaincy. Absolutely. Last year I made it a clear plan to make sure I always had, when I could, my favourite captain for that week in my team, even if it meant transferring out a big hitter and stuff like that. I don't think differential captains for the most part are needed. Sometimes they're good, they can work out, but you want to go for kind of proven players. No planned transfers at the start of the season. I really like this. There'll be loads of transfers that come up that you need to go through. Keep 0.5 million in the bank. I don't think I've ever done that, but I see the appeal, because if there's a player you want to bring, let's say you've gone for a 7.5 million, you want to suddenly get someone in who's looking really good, you know they're about to go up in price, you were thinking about getting them anyway, you want to get them in before they're really highly priced. If they're that little bit more expensive, you've got no money in the bank, then suddenly you're taking hits, and that's going to cost you points. So keep a 0.5 if you're happy with the team. Not a bad suggestion. Play it templating safe at the beginning. I hate this, right? I hate this saying, right? I can't remember who said it. I apologise, but loads of people say this, right? Play template. What does that mean? Right? Does that mean you're bringing in players that are popular? Why are they popular? Because they're good. Who cares if Mo Salah's 50% owned and you're playing it template? People always say play it template as if it's a negative thing, right? People, most of the time, players are popular for a reason. Simple as that, okay? So play it safe. What does that mean? Buy players that are going to score you points? Of course. That's what you want to do. I hate that play it safe, play it template. It grates on me a little bit. So yeah. I mean, yeah, do that. If Bruno Fernandes and Salah are 50% owned and they're going to score you lots of points, buy them. Why wouldn't you? Right? Stop trying to win FPL in the first week. Anyway, right, that one riled me up a little bit. Don't stress about creating a team. Now, a few people said this. They said don't draft until closer to the season. Absolutely fine. I mean, personally, I like creating drafts. I like tinkering and stuff like that. But yeah, you don't want to burn out too early, that's for sure. And have clear reasons for your picks. You want to be able to tell someone why that player is in your team. And if you can't, you should probably rethink them. I like that. I really liked that tip. A few others. Don't stress if you have a bad game week or a bad start to the season. Absolutely, there's loads of time to go. Be careful for bandwagons. Again, challenge that info. Why is it happening? Are they genuinely a good pick? Don't check ownership before game week 1. I quite like that, right? It shouldn't really play into your decisions. Again, if Salah and Fernandes are really highly owned and you want them, just get them. If there's another player you think is a genuinely really great pick, and for some reason other people haven't picked up on it, so what? Just get them in. And don't be afraid of data. I love this. Stats are good. Don't be afraid of them. Okay, so now I want to move on to some of the specific messages that I received from these like 100 FPL managers that I asked, right? So I have obviously cherry-picked these. It's not to say that everyone else's advice was bad. It's just that I thought these were quite interesting. And to be honest, there was so many to go through, I wouldn't have been able to put everyone's up anyway. So this is from Suj. Suj is part of Planet FPL. Go and follow them if you haven't already. He didn't ask me to say that, by the way, but he definitely should have. I'm actually going on their podcast today, actually. But probably you won't see it till Thursday, I guess. The most difficult opponent you face in FPL is yourself. Absolutely. Right? People question themselves all the time. And I think, to be honest, as much as I like making drafts and stuff and tinkering with certain players in certain positions, I do think for a lot of people that's a bit of a problem, because it gets to the point where you've made this draft, right? It's a genuinely good draft. You've picked some really solid players. But the problem is you've got 2 or 3 weeks to go. There's loads of friendlies going on. There's loads of transfer speculation. And I think ultimately people get a bit bored with their team. So they start looking for reasons to sell really good players. And there's nothing wrong, again, with challenging that info, even questioning yourself. But don't question yourself to the point where you're making a bad decision, right? You need to just trust yourself at times. If you've picked a solid group of players and you're finding it difficult to change them, that's perfectly fine. You've probably picked a good squad. If you struggle to make decisions or you find a playing style that works for you, so that could be that you're maybe an aggressive manager, maybe you play it safe, maybe you don't take hits, maybe you like taking hits. You need to decide kind of how you want to play and what's worked for you in the past. Start writing down rules and criteria to make decisions by and why. So I know like Blackbox, so Mark and Az on FPL Blackbox, you can go and check them out. They have a list of stuff they try and stick to. What I would say though is you also need to be flexible, and you need to kind of understand that at times those rules need to be forgotten about for whatever reason it might be. But again, you need a really good reason to do that. And maybe even, I don't know, let's say you've written down a rule and you want to break it, you probably need to write down a bunch of reasons why you're breaking it and whether that's a good or bad thing. So I like this from Suj. Most difficult opponent in FPL you face is yourself. Absolutely. Okay, so this is from Buller, aka Move78_FPL. Firmly stand by and believe in your own principles of playing as a basis, right? So they're saying for them, they will start with flexible price points and mostly talismans. So you're looking at, with talisman, you're basically looking at the best players from those teams. So you're like, so your Salahs, your Fernandez's, your etc. They're always on the top of my head. Harry Kane for Spurs. There you go. There's someone different. Probably Grealish for Aston Villa, right? Players like that. I'll consume content, but I will make myself very difficult to pull away from what I believe in or perceive, because most of what we think we know will be wrong, right? So I think that's really interesting. So if I get this all the time, right? Obviously, I've got a YouTube channel, thousands of people watching. They've all got their opinion. That's absolutely perfectly fine. Right? I love seeing comments about why I'm wrong, as long as there's good reason for it, right? I hate seeing, yeah, that pick's bad. Why is that pick bad? Right? I want to know. I want to know your reasons, and maybe I'll change my mind. But if I make a team and I go on a live stream and people start questioning me about players, they will have to have a really, really good reason for me to doubt my pick. And I try and do that a lot. And it's really difficult when you, obviously for a lot of people, they're not running an FPL channel or they're not running a podcast or whatever. So it's a little bit easier. But even if you put your team out on Twitter or something like that, you're going to get hundreds of managers with an opinion, and they're mostly going to want to bring your team to look more like theirs. That's natural, right? But you need to definitely question what they're saying. And they better have a very, very good reason about why you're wrong. You're not always going to be right. And that's something I think FPL managers need to realise. You're going to get it wrong at times. But as long as you stick to, I don't know, the optimal play, however that is for you, it might be stats, it might be eye test, it might be whatever, then I think that's fine, right? And then it ends with, this means always make your first draft before looking at others. Yeah, like that. This one is so simple, right? But I love it, right? We are building a team that will last until our first wildcard, not for the entire season. Not for the entire season is so important. People always ask questions as if there's no transfers in this game. Like, this player's going to score 250 points. Right, but are they going to score it right at the start of the season when they're about to play Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Man United in the first 6 fixtures? Probably not. After that, they might score in a bunch of points. You're not building it for the season. I mean, I would even argue to a certain extent, you're not even building it till the first wildcard, right? Now, some people will book in a slot to use their wildcard, and I know this season it's going to be popular to do it around game week 7 or 8, but some people will just build their squad for the first 4 fixtures, perfectly fine, 4 to 6, and they'll worry about when the wildcard is going to come later on. Maybe, I don't know, a bunch of players that were going to come on the wildcard are now injured, so they're reassessing, they're just going to make a few transfers instead and save it for a bit longer. But ultimately, we are not building teams for the season. We have transfers. We can take additional hits if we need to, right? So here's a couple of examples I keep seeing. How can all these drafts that I'm seeing not have Man City players in, right? Man City open up with Spurs. Then they got Norwich. That's really, really good. Great fixture, right? And I'd love to have a Man City player for that. But then it's Arsenal, then it's Leicester, and then it's Chelsea, and then it's Liverpool. So in the first 7 fixtures, they play Spurs, Arsenal, Leicester, Chelsea, Liverpool, right? Now, you could argue, right, and it'd be a good argument, that Man City are the best team in the league. So they can score in all those fixtures. They can keep clean sheets in all those fixtures. Absolutely. But just like any team, when you play harder fixtures, it's going to be harder to do that, right? And also for Man City, obviously, we don't 100% know who's nailed on in defence or in attack. Now, obviously, there's some players, Ederson, Diaz, etc. De Bruyne will play most games, but we don't know 100%. Now, some of the most important or periods of play last year with Man City players were when Laporte was injured, and John Stones played pretty much every single match. Now, he might be first choice and ahead of Laporte anyway, but there was a certain period where that happened last year. He was brilliant. At the same time, De Bruyne got injured and Gundogan became a great option, and he was playing every single week, right? And there's certain times when that's going to happen. At the start of the season, yeah, okay, that Norwich fixture looks really good. They could score goals against Arsenal and Leicester, but the fixtures aren't amazing, so I'm not rushing to put them in. Chelsea's another one, right? Chelsea are going to do really well. They're going to keep the most clean sheets this year. Possibly. That could be a correct statement. But in their opening 6 fixtures, they play Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs, and Man City. It's really tough. Could they keep clean sheets in all 4 of those fixtures? Yes, they could. But is the likelihood less than in the next 6 fixtures where they play Southampton, Brentford, Norwich, Newcastle, Burnley? Yes, and there's plenty of defenders with better fixtures for the opening set. So not building the team for the season is so important. We have transfers. It doesn't really matter if a player is going to go on and score 200, 250 points. I don't really care about that right now. What I want to know is who's going to score the most points in the first 6 weeks of the season. And realistically, right now, that's all that matters. Okay, so this is from FPL Pig. Obviously, everyone's got these great Twitter handles, but he is a great follow. You should go and follow. Everyone on the first list of people, right, is great, all 100 managers. But if you ask FPL Pig nicely, he'll write a song and sing it to you, probably. So make your own decisions. This applies to the entire season, but especially during pre-season, right? Yeah, everyone shouldn't be making their own decisions. You shouldn't be asking someone else to pick a team. You can ask someone else to give you an opinion on a couple of players or why they're picking this player or that player, but ultimately you should either agree with that info or you should disagree with it and challenge it and then make your own decision, right? You'll be bombarded with information on certain players and teams, some good, some bad. This is the key point. It's kind of similar to another one I saw already, but all that information is a tool to form your own decisions. Do you agree? Is it correct? Is the information complete? You need to decide. So you basically need to do your own research. It's more rewarding. And one of the things to do, I think, is ask people how they're analysing fixtures or how they're analysing players. Why are they picking that player? How have they come to that decision? And then that will make your life easier in the future because then you'll know how to analyse teams or analyse players. And you might not want to do it the same way, but some of it might be a bit similar, right? So I think that's really important. For me, I like to use expected data, right? XG, expected assists, expected goals conceded. They're the main stats that I will use to assess a player, maybe over 90 minutes, etc. You'll see that in some of my videos. And that kind of keeps it objective for the most part because everyone's under the same conditions. Sometimes I'll watch a player and think, right, I need to bring them in. I know that these teams are bad. I want to bring this player in. He hasn't quite done it yet, but I think he will. But obviously, I'm making that decision. I'm not letting someone else make it for me. And if I'm really stuck on a decision like a 50-50, I won't go out and ask everyone. I generally won't put out a tweet and say, who should I get for this or that player? I'll go and ask a few individual players and just see what their reasons are and stuff like that. So definitely, there's lots and lots of information. Part of the key thing with FPL is trying to decipher what's good or bad information. And part of that is not going to necessarily research it all yourself. But if there's something that doesn't seem right, you should probably go and work it out for yourself and decide whether it was true or not in the first place. Okay, so this one, treat uncertainties in management and playing style with caution, right? So this basically includes, this is what they're saying, new manager, players moving to the Premier League, promoted teams and stuff like that. So we've seen that already about how a lot of people are thinking about avoiding promoted players that are new to the game or to the league, etc., right? And go for known players with predictable performances. So these might be players that did it last year. They've done it over 2 seasons, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, like Salah, for example, and they're the ones to go for, right? And again, you don't necessarily, and I know it's boring for some managers to hear this, but you don't win FPL at the start of the season, right? I don't think you win it or lose it. So there's no bonus really in going for a bunch of unproven players. Now, I don't think that you should go for none if you don't want to. At the end of the day, right, and this is something we probably forget, and sometimes I forget in the way that I talk, FPL is supposed to be fun. So if you've got 8 or 9 absolutely solid, proven players, maybe even 10, you want to go for 1 or you want to go for 2 punts, then why not, right? As long as you've got those core players in place, you've got your core captains in place, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of a punt, whether that's Tony for Brentford or maybe it's Sancho when he comes to the league, depending on his price. There's nothing wrong with that, but you don't necessarily want to do it to the detriment of the rest of your squad. So I kind of agree with this. Like, for example, for me, we got a lot of new managers this year at teams where there's probably players we want, right? So we've got Nuno at Spurs, we've got Kane, Son, maybe some of their defenders now, they're cheap. Got Benitez at Everton, how attacking will they be? Will Luca Dean be asked to stay back a bit more? Will Calvert-Lewin get as much deliveries into him, etc.? Will it mostly be crosses, whatever, right? Will they be a more defensive side? You got Lager at Wolves as well. Will they be more attacking? Will that make them worse at the back? Will it make their attackers better? Will their fullbacks be more attacking? There's all these questions, and if you're absolutely not sure, you probably don't want to put too many players from those teams in right now. It doesn't mean to avoid them completely. Everton have got great fixtures. I probably will still go for Calvert-Lewin, but I'd be careful about how many other players that I put in my team. There's nothing wrong with waiting a little bit and then seeing. Sometimes you're going to want to punt on fixtures. Sometimes you're just going to want to take a punt for the sake of it. Sometimes a player's been playing well, but someone doesn't want to pick. A lot of FPL managers don't want to pick them up and you want to go early. But there's also nothing wrong with just waiting, seeing how they play, reassessing, and then making your picks. So there we go. That is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. That was 100 FPL managers and what they had to say for their number 1 tip going into kind of pre-season, but also obviously the start of the season. Well, if you enjoyed it, took a bit of time, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. I'll have loads more content obviously to come for pre-season, rest of the season as usual. And thank you to everybody that signed up on Patreon. Fahim, our new recruit. If you want to have a look at that, there is a link in the description below where you can sign up. There's loads of extra content, a few extra perks and stuff like that. I won't go through them all now, but if you want to check it out, link in the description below, right? I'll leave it there. Thank you to every FPL manager that replied to me. Apologies if you weren't picked. Like I said, I didn't really cherry pick people. It was just on a list, followers, who was on my timeline at the time and stuff like that. So thank you very much. If you enjoyed it, if you've got any other ideas, things you want me to do, leave a comment below. And also, let me know your number 1 tip. I'll leave it there. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.